So we live in a world of exponential change. I think we've all heard about it from different presenters about AI, different exponential technologies. And it's predicted that technology and basically technology artifacts are basically going to double their computational price performance every 18 months. So that means AI, machine learning, robotics, 3D printing, all these exponential technologies are doubling their capabilities every 18 months. Now, while technology and technology artifacts are moving really quickly, the way that our mind is wired is actually in a very linear and incremental way. So a linear or incremental mindset focuses on making things better, where an exponential mindset focuses on making things different. That's the difference between linear and exponential. And in order to tap into technology changes and advancements, we really need to start to adopt an exponential mindset. And without having an exponential mindset, we wouldn't have companies like Google having such an ambitious, vision, which is to organize the world's information. We wouldn't have Facebook setting out to create a world that is more open and more connected, or Airbnb creating a world where all 7 billion of us can feel like they belong anywhere. So this is the power of exponential. And what we see in the market today is really a whole new breed of organizations who are tapping into this exponential technology's growth and who are literally disrupting every single business segment. They are scaling and they are generating revenue in a pace that we've never seen before. We basically entered the age of the billion-dollar startup and soon the trillion-dollar corporation, where it used to take a Fortune 500 company maybe about 20 years in business to reach $1 billion market cap. Today, companies like Google, Airbnb, Uber, many more, WhatsApp, reach that cap in 8 years and sometimes in a matter of months. So they're moving fast and they're super successful, and basically it's predicted that in 10 years from now, more than 40% of Fortune 500 companies will no longer exist. So welcome to the world where your age, the number of employees that you have, your profit, your revenue, your market cap does not guarantee that you're going to be around tomorrow. So my question is, how do we explain this? How do we explain that an entire industry can be invaded and conquered, sometimes in months, by a startup that has no resources and let alone market dominance? How do we do that? So the answer to that is the platform. And what the platform is basically a business model that uses technology to connect people, organizations, and resources in an interactive ecosystem where value can be created and exchanged. So companies that I mentioned until now, Facebook, Google, Airbnb, Uber, all are examples of platforms. We all know them. More include Amazon, YouTube, Spotify, SAP, Kickstarter, and the list goes on. And there's more and more and more companies joining, not just tech companies. So, and it's no surprise that 5 out of the top 10 most successful companies in the world listed by market cap are platform companies. So platforms are really fundamental in the digital and global economy, often referred to as the platform economy. So before I explain how platform works, I want to talk a little bit about what platforms are not, because that really helps to understand how platform works. So platforms are not a linear pipeline. They're not the way traditional businesses are built in a very linear, incremental way, where you have a producer on the one hand, a consumer on the other hand, and value is created in a step-by-step way, a very closed ecosystem, where you create your product or your service, you package it, you distribute it, and then you sell it. Platforms are different. Platforms look more like a triangle, where we have consumers, we have producers, and then we have the platform in between. And the platform kind of provides the resources for the consumers and the producers to interact. The platform enables the interaction. And that's really the most important role of the platform, to repeatedly improve the quality and the quantity of those interactions. And you don't always have to operate in this asset-light mode like Uber or Airbnb. You can also operate in the middle. So in the far left, we have companies like Dell and Coca-Cola having a very linear pipeline where they produce basically their hardware, their physical hardware. And then we have companies in the middle that use the production of the physical hardware and then run the platform on top of it. So Apple producing the phone and then running the App Store, which is a platform on top of the actual physical phone. So there are three main things that really are responsible for the rise of the platform that we see all around us. And that's connectivity, intelligence, and production. So first of all, connectivity, everything is starting to get connected, right? So it started with desktops, then we got connected through smartphones, and now everything is connected through the Internet of Things. And everything that is connected is becoming intelligent, right? We give data, we get back intelligent. So connectivity and intelligence work very much hand in hand. And production, the means of production are no longer just with the big companies. So this allows small companies to easily scale and create this large, successful companies. When we look at the world, and we split the world into 4 different regions, so let's say North America, Asia, Europe, and Africa and Latin America, and a bunch of other countries, we see that most of those platforms are actually in North America, most of those billion-dollar startups, or companies, not just startups. After that, we see a large dominance in Asia, where the Chinese market is really dominating with TD.com, Tencent, Alibaba. And then fascinatingly enough, in Europe, we see pretty much SAP and Spotify leading there. So we see very few platforms in Europe. And there are a few reasons for that. So first of all, the fact, English and Mandarin have very large populations associated with them that allows us to scale platforms very easily. Also in Europe, every country has its own privacy policy. There's different regulations for different countries, so that really kind of blocks the scalability of a platform in this region. But we do see that the European Commission and regulatory are really trying to learn from North America and try to scale companies in that region as well. And really, platforms are the brainchild of Silicon Valley. Often I'm being asked, aren't these platforms just, going to disappear and just an invention of VCs and are going to disappear once VCs are going to be tired of losing their money? And indeed, in some cases, it's not really sure where this is going. We see, for example, in the ride-sharing business, we see a lot of companies bleeding cash. We see Lyft, we see Uber, European companies, Asian companies, everyone competing on that market share, and it's not really clear who's going to come up on top. But then, if we take the profit, not just revenue, but profit, of all the public platform companies around the world, and we accumulate that profit over a 5-year period, we reach more than $1.5 trillion in revenue, in profit. So the answer to incumbent firms that are wondering if platforms are disappearing anytime soon is not anytime soon. They're here to stay. And we see that a lot of the startups are tapping into this kind of business models. We see a lot of startups structuring themselves as a platform. VCs are very interested in these types of companies, so it's really, really picking up and spreading like crazy. The most important thing for you to understand when I'm talking about platform is the network effect. And to explain a network effect, I'm just going to give you a small example on looking at a phone network. The idea of a network effect is as more and more users join your network, the value of your network increases. So for example, if we look at the network of phones, if we have 2 phones, we have 1 connection. So very simple value of our overall network. If we add more phones, let's say we have 5 phones, the value increases to 10 connections. So more users, more value. If we add more phones, 12 phones, it increases to 66. Same with the App Store. So if we have a lot of app developers that create apps for our App Store, then more consumers want to belong or tab into that App Store to consume those apps. And as more consumers join the App Store, more app developers want to join as well to create apps. So users create value for users. That's the idea of the network effect. And we see this with many, many platform-based companies, how the demand and supply kind of build on each other to create growth and scalability. So I want to talk about, there's a lot of things that change when we shift from linear thinking, pipeline, closed ecosystem to an open platform-based system. But I want to highlight a few fundamental things that are changing when we shift our business and make that change. So first of all, marketing is changing from push to pull. And I'm talking about virality and social influencers. And I want to separate, I really want to distinct virality from word of mouth. So word of mouth, as we all know, happens when our consumers, users really love our products or our services and they can't stop talking about it. But virality is different. So for example, when Instagram came out, we started to use Instagram. We didn't actually have to go around and tell everyone, hey, we're using Instagram, you should check it out, you should download it, it's a great app. All we had to do is take a photo with Instagram, share it on Facebook, everybody knew about it. Instagram instantly tabbed into our network over Facebook and grew massively. So that's virality. Consumers don't need to love your product. They just need, by virtue of using your product, it's scaling. So all you have to do as a company when you have a platform is really think, how do I align my scalability objectives with the actual usage of my product or my service? And we see in marketing kind of shifting. Back in the 80s, we sent one message to everyone, broadcasting one message. Then we fine-tuned it to a specific group in the 90s, and then we specifically sent it to a one-to-one targeted audience. And then we flipped things from 2010 and moved it from push to pull, introducing virality and social influencers. Another thing that changes is the ecosystem is the new warehouse. So you don't need to own all the pieces to create an end-to-end solution, but your ecosystem needs to own all those pieces to have an end-to-end solution, right? If we look at Uber, if we look at Airbnb, if we look at Amazon also. So for example, in the case of Amazon, I don't know if you remember, it actually started as just an online shop, replicating what's happening offline, online. So initially they created kind of like a pipeline-based business where they aggregated, they sourced the product, they managed the inventory, and then sold it directly to the user on Amazon.com. And then eventually they started to move towards the platform and created a marketplace and opened their gates to third-party merchants through their affiliated program, widgets, APIs, allowing everyone to hook into their system, customize it, and sell their own products, right? So moving from a warehouse-powered store to an ecosystem-powered marketplace. And we see that happening with a lot of companies. For example, Brian Chesky, the founder of Airbnb, tweeted a while ago, Marriott is going to add 30,000 rooms next year, and then he said we're probably going to do that in the next 2 weeks. So competing with the hotel industry using the power of his ecosystem without owning basically anything. We see the same with online news and the publishers world. For example, Huffington Post, that used to have all their writers in-house, kind of scaling their business and creating an entire ecosystem of writers. And we see the same with Wired and Forbes and many, many other media companies. And SoundCloud and YouTube kind of unlocking an entire ecosystem of content creators. Innovation has basically happened when you open your platform, open your system to third-party producers, which can be app developers, it could be writers, it could be hosts. It really depends on the value of your actual platform. And the network effect, as I mentioned before, is really at the heart of everything to create a successful business. And if you think about it, when we're focused on the network effect, actually the focus is moving from inside of the firm to outside of the firm. Because you can't actually scale a business without external partners, external producers, external consumers. So you're focusing more on the outside of your company rather than the inside. And obviously, we've all been talking about this, data is the new dollar, or as the economist likes to call it, data is the new oil. So just like we optimize businesses and we account for dollars and we track how much dollars goes in, how much dollars goes out, we have an accounting system. When we're talking about data-based businesses, and which is really at the heart of also platform-based businesses, we really have to start to account for data. And what that means is that if you don't have the data that you need, you have to start to think, what are the services that I need to put out there to get that data? And we see a lot of companies providing services for free, and people wonder why are they providing this for free? It totally doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense, but it totally makes sense if it gets you the data that you need to monetize your system. So in other words, you really need to have a data strategy, because you really need to account for data. It won't just show up, if you won't do that. And we see that when you collect all this data and kind of, and follow your users, the boundaries of your system and of your business start to dissolve. So for example, LinkedIn is really collecting a lot of data about their users, which allow them to create a much more successful marketplace than Monster and beat Monster. And Monster never saw LinkedIn coming into their space. So this is really the power of data. You start to tap into markets that you never even thought you belonged to. We see the same with car manufacturers, reimagining cars as a platform. They continuously stream usage of the car post-sale to provide new services post the actual sale to their consumers. And if you think about it, also insurance companies can really use that data to kind of customize and give customized premiums for their users. And community management is the new HR management. So what do I mean with that? So first of all, community management is not marketing. It's not about sending messages about your product or your service to the community. Community management is basically looking at your community as distributed employees. Just like an HR department is continuously incentivizing employees to create better output and create a successful company, we have to start looking at the community as distributed employees to incentivize them to keep on coming to the platform to create the value and to create that network effect. That's the biggest difference. A great example is Instagram. So after the founders, the first hire wasn't an engineer or a designer, which is very rare for a Silicon Valley company. It was actually a community manager, because they realized the community is where the value is being created. And also, if you think about it, Instagram wasn't sold for $1 billion because of their amazing 13 employees, although I'm sure they're fantastic. It was sold because of their 30 million users of a community that created their community. And curation and reputation is the new QA. So when we moved from a very closed ecosystem to a very open one, we need to start thinking on how do we vet who comes in? Because we want to have the network effect, but we want to have a positive network effect, because a negative one is not a good thing. So traditional companies have internal gatekeepers, and they really kind of filter who comes in. When you have a platform, you have to start to think, okay, who is allowed into the platform? What are their rights? And how do we filter that? So different companies doing it in different ways. We have Uber, for example, that does background checks about their drivers. We have Airbnb that is using different social signals, like you can review your host can review you. We have YouTube, Quora, and Reddit that are basically using voting mechanisms to kind of bubble the best content on top. So there's different ways to do that, but bottom line, you need new mechanisms to kind of filter who comes in. And lastly, behavior design is the new loyalty program. So traditionally, companies would have a loyalty program to kind of make sure that consumers are trapped into the system, but it makes less kind of sense when you have so much choice as a consumer. So what you really want to do is focus on changing the behavior of your consumers when they interact with your system. So that the 100 times that consumers interact with your product or your service, it's going to be more valuable than the first time. A great example is Facebook daily newsfeed. They constantly feed information from your network to your daily feed. So this is why people are checking their Facebook sometimes even 30 times a day, because it's changing. It gives them more value. So until not long ago, when we looked at digital transformation, we kind of saw this. A bunch of experiments all happening in different parts of the organization, one in marketing, one in customer service, at the same time and disconnected. But now companies are starting to understand the value is not so much in those standalone experiments. The value is in the common infrastructure that connects all these experiments, so that if one experiment is successful, it will then feed into the success of the overall system and not just a specific business line. So for a long time we heard software is eating the world. While software indeed started the economic revolution, it is platforms that are eating the world. Platforms really dominate the internet, they dominate the global economy, and the reason for that is because they create entire ecosystem that basically do most of the work for your company to drive its growth and success. Thank you.